It all started on a Thursday morning, the kind where the dew still clings to the grass, and the sun rises slow and golden over the hills. I was just getting back from a night operation, bone tired, boots caked in red dirt, and running on nothing but black coffee and instinct. I parked my government-issued blacked-out Jeep Wrangler right beside the barn like I always do, padlocked behind the chain-link gate on my land, mind you. When I saw her, clipboard in hand, that pinched-up face like she'd sucked a lemon and got mad at the lemon, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. What she did next set off a chain of events so twisted and unbelievable. It ended with flashing lights, a legal firestorm, and a whole damn board thrown into disarray. See, what Karen didn't know, couldn't have known, was that the Jeep she had towed didn't just belong to me. It was under the control of a multi-agency police task force, and by cutting that lock, she'd just declared war on the wrong man. Let me back it up a bit so this all makes sense. I live in a semi-rural community on the edge of a fast-growing town just outside Dallas, Texas. Think pickup trucks, horses, and folks who still wave when they pass you on the road. Used to be mostly ranchers and retirees out here, but lately, more and more of the city folks have been moving in, bringing with them their soy lattes and HOA boards. Don't get me wrong, progress ain't the problem. The problem is when that progress tries to wrap barbed wire around common sense. About 5 years ago, they slapped an HOA right over our neighborhood like a fresh coat of paint on an old barn. Said it was to maintain property values, but we all knew what it meant. Rules, regulations, and folks like Karen. She moved in about a year after the HOA was formed, straight from California according to her bumper sticker. She was the kind who measured grass with a ruler and sent passive emails if your trash bin was out 5 minutes past pickup, had a laminated map of the subdivision and walked it daily like she was patrolling for enemy combatants, always in yoga pants, always with that damn clipboard. Now me, I'm not the kind to pick a fight. I served my time in the army, came home, and took a government job that lets me stay involved in some specialized law enforcement work. Don't ask too many questions about the Jeep. Just know that it's got modifications that don't come from any dealership and a GPS tracker that pings back to a federal server every 30 seconds. It ain't for joyriding, and it damn sure ain't HOA business. The first warning sign came 3 days before the incident. I found a notice taped to my mailbox, unauthorized vehicle, subject to fine and removal, in bold red letters. No name, no contact number, just the HOA letterhead and a vague citation about ice wars. The Jeep was parked behind my locked fence, out of view from the street. I figured it was a mistake, tossed the letter and went about my day. Second sign came the day before it all went down. I caught Karen standing just outside my gate, taking photos of the Jeep with her phone, angling her body like she was hiding behind a rose bush. I opened the gate, walked right up to her and said, "Can I help you?" She jumped like a cat in a thunderstorm. Then she snapped back with that brittle smile. "Just documenting a code violation, sir, on my property." I asked according to the HOA charter, she said, pulling out a printed booklet from her tote bag like it was the Constitution. "All visible vehicles must be in compliance with community aesthetics." I stepped a little closer. "That Jeep is a federal asset, Karen. You mess with it, and you're messing with more than me." She didn't flinch, just scribbled something on her clipboard and walked off like she'd won. Now here's where it gets good. Next morning, I woke up to the sound of chains rattling, looked out the window and saw 2 men with bolt cutters standing by my gate. Karen was there, arms crossed, lips pursed. I stormed out the front door, half-dressed, boots unlaced. "Hey," I hollered, "what the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen didn't even turn around. She barked something at the tow guys, and before I could cross the yard, the lock, it snapped off with a loud metallic pop. They rolled in like it was a repo, hooked the Jeep and started winching it up onto the flatbed. I was shouting, running, grabbing my phone to call the sheriff. Karen turned around then, finally, with that same tight-lipped smirk. "You were warned," she said. "Repeated violations. Unregistered vehicle. This is an HOA matter now. You have no idea what you've just done," I said, chest heaving. She rolled her eyes. "Sir, it's just a Jeep." I didn't answer. I was already dialing a number I hoped I'd never have to call from home. And that, was the moment everything changed. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice picked up on the other end. "This is Baker, go." "It's me," I said. "We got a situation." He didn't say anything for a second, but I could hear the silence tighten. "Where are you?" "Home. They took the Jeep." Double quotes, ... Define they, HOA, towed it to cut my gate lock. The response was immediate. "We're rolling. Sit tight. Don't engage." Click. That was the end of that call. But it was just the beginning of the storm. I stood there in the driveway still, breathing heavy, watching the flatbed disappear down the road with my G-powered Jeep on it. Karen turned on her heel and strutted back toward her Prius like she'd just won a neighborhood bake-off. Her clipboard bounced against her hip with every self-satisfied step. I took pictures of the broken gate, of the cut lock, of the tow truck's plates. Evidence, paper trail. I'd learned a long time ago, in court and in combat. Facts win fights. By The time the sheriff pulled up 20 minutes later, I'd already called in the incident and briefed him on the basics. Sheriff Murdoch was a good man. Local gray hair, mustache, thick as a paintbrush, and a long memory. He knew me, knew my work, knew not to ask too many questions. He stepped out of his cruiser and took one look at the busted gate. They cut this right through a government-issued lock, I said. He nodded slowly. You want to press charges? I want my Jeep back first. That's when we heard the sirens, not the county boys. This was a federal tone. Fast, sharp, not the kind you ignore. 3 black SUVs rolled down the road like a funeral procession for common sense, all tinted, all moving with purpose. They pulled in just as Murdoch was walking the perimeter. The first one stopped inches from the edge of my property line. Out stepped Baker. He was still in his field vest, badge clipped to the front, sidearm holstered with purpose. Where is it? I pointed. Flatbed took it maybe 15 minutes ago. Northbound. Belongs to Joe's recovery shop in town. Baker turned to his guys. We move now. Secondary team to Joe's, tertiary to precinct in case it's impounded. Lock it all down. No movement without my say. Then he turned to Murdoch. Sheriff, we need cooperation, fast and full. Murdoch didn't blink. You got it. Karen, bless her little yoga-panted heart, chose that exact moment to come walking back around the corner. Oh, don't tell me all this fuss is about that old Jeep, she said, not a care in the world. Baker raised a hand. Ma'am, this is now a federal investigation. Karen blinked once, twice. Excuse me, you are not to leave the neighborhood. You will surrender any footage or documentation taken of this property in the last 7 days, and you will comply, immediately. Now, I wish I had a camera on her face right then. The smirk, gone. The clipboard, lowered. The voice, shaky. I was just following the HOA charter, she stammered. Baker stepped closer. And you just, when it interfered with an undercover law enforcement asset, that's obstruction at best, at worst. Tampering with an active federal operation. She took a step back. I didn't know. No one told me. You didn't ask, I said. I warned you, and just like that, Queen Karen lost her crown. They took statements on site, pulled camera footage from my home system. Within hours, the Jeep was secured and back where it belonged, minus a busted hitch and some curious pawing around the hidden panels. Someone at Joe's had tried to open something they shouldn't have. That would be a whole other investigation. By nightfall, Karen had received an official cease and desist from the feds, and the HOA board was suddenly very, very quiet. But that was just the calm before the real storm, because the fallout from Karen's little power trip that was just getting started. By sunrise the next morning, word had spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Nothing stays secret long in a community where everyone's watching everyone else, and HOA drama is more addictive than morning coffee. I was sitting on my porch, cup in hand, boots up, and eyes scanning the tree line. Old habits die hard. The Jeep was back behind the gate, this time double-locked with reinforced chains, but the peace was temporary. I could feel it in my gut. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. Not with her pride bruised and clipboard authority stripped clean. Off sure enough. By 9 a.m., I got a call from my neighbor, Bill, who worked maintenance on the HOA grounds. He'd been there 15 years, seen boards come and go. But this was something new. You're not gonna believe what's happening at the clubhouse, he said, half whispering like the trees might be listening. Try me, I said, already standing up. They're meeting in secret. No agenda posted. No notices sent. Doors locked. Karen's in there with 3 board members and a stack of files. Damage control, I muttered. Looks like it, Bill said. And she's red in the face like full-on meltdown mode. I told him to keep his eyes and ears open, then hung up and walked inside to retrieve something I hadn't touched in a while. My old digital recorder. If they wanted a quiet cover-up, they were about to meet a little noise. That afternoon, I swung by the clubhouse with my phone running audio, a fresh pair of work gloves tucked in my back pocket just in case, and a perfectly casual smile. The doors were locked, just like Bill said. Curtains drawn, but through the side window I could make out the silhouettes of 4 people seated at the big oak table. One of them stood Karen, by the height and sharp angles. Her voice was muffled, but her tone was clear. Angry, desperate. I looped around the building and pretended to check the bulletin board. Just then, the door cracked open a hair. Another board member, Doug, I think his name was, stepped out and saw me. We're in a private session, he stammered. Didn't see it posted, I said. Open meetings are in the charter, right? He swallowed hard. This is ... a legal issue, internal. I bet it is, I said. Well, I'll just let the county know you're meeting off in violation of the bylaws. Should make for a fun little ethics review. He turned pale. Look, we're just trying to get ahead of things. Maybe next time, don't break federal law to enforce lawn care, I said, tipping my hat and walking off. By the next day, 2 things happened almost at once. First, I got a letter from the HOA's legal rep. They were trying to absolve themselves of liability, pinning the entire incident on Karen acting independently. Nice try. Second, and more interestingly, I got a knock on my door from none other than Sheriff Murdoch himself. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. I waved him through. "What's the word?" He sighed and dropped a manila folder on my kitchen table. Inside, emails HOA internal communications. One of Baker's tech boys had pulled them from Karen's laptop when they executed a federal preservation order. Turns out Karen had been trying to flag my Jeep for months. She'd even suggested using enhanced enforcement methods to protect the aesthetic integrity of the community. Translation: get rid of what she didn't like. One email caught my eye in particular. It was from Karen to the board president, sent 2 weeks before the incident. It read, "If he thinks his special vehicle makes him above the rules, he's got another thing coming. I don't care who he works for. No one is above this HOA." It wasn't just pettiness anymore. It was obsession. Murdoch looked at me and said, "There's more coming. Word is, a few folks on the board knew she was going rogue and let it happen anyway." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends," he said, "on how loud you want to be." I leaned back, eyes on the window, where the afternoon sun was setting over the pasture. "Let's make it deafening." By the end of that week, the HOA board was in full-blown crisis mode. You could almost smell the panic wafting off the clubhouse. Neighbors started whispering on driveways. More than a few folks who usually minded their business suddenly had very strong opinions about property rights, fences, and the mysterious Jeep behind mine. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had targeted. It started with me, but now people were coming forward, folks who'd had their flower pots sighted, their wind chimes measured, their paint shades questioned by clipboard decree. She'd been running a quiet little tyranny, and now that the lights were on, the roaches were scattering. The board called an emergency town hall, not just a board meeting, a full community gathering. First one in years. They sent out glossy postcards and even offered lemonade and cookies, like that was going to sweeten the mess they'd made. I showed up early and sat in the back, right beneath the flickering fluorescent light. I wasn't there to talk, not yet. I was there to listen. Doug, the board's vice president, opened the meeting with all the charm of a man who hadn't slept in 4 days. "We'd like to begin by addressing the incident involving the unauthorized towing of a resident's vehicle." He avoided eye contact with me the entire time, "and we want to assure you that the board had no knowledge of the specific enforcement action taken by Miss Karen Mitchell." That's when Karen stood up. She wasn't invited to speak, but Karen never needed an invitation. Dressed in her best beige blazer and pearls, she looked like she was about to audition for a courthouse drama. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with fury. "I acted to preserve this neighborhood," she said. "I acted because no one else had the courage to enforce the rules." The crowd murmured. Someone up front laughed. "And you," she said, pointing right at me, "you think because you wear a badge behind closed doors that you're above the rest of us." I stood up, slow, deliberate. I hadn't planned to say anything, but sometimes justice needs a voice. "I don't think I'm above anyone," I said, "but I do think cutting through a federal lock and towing a government asset without a warrant, that puts you below the law." Way below. A couple folks clapped. Karen turned red as a fire truck. "I was never informed it was a federal vehicle," she shrieked. "You were told." I said, "You just didn't listen." Doug jumped in, desperate to control the room. "Let's all calm down," but it was too late. The crowd had turned. People started speaking up about their own experiences, about the petty citations. The board tried to gavel them down, but the dam had broken. One woman near the front stood up with a folder full of printed notices. "This is every warning I've gotten from Karen in the past 6 months. For what? A bench being too close to the sidewalk." Another man chimed in. "She said my kid's lemonade stand was a health code violation." The room was on fire, and Karen was at the center of the flame. Finally, someone motioned to remove her from the board altogether. The vote was loud, swift, and nearly unanimous. Doug cast the lone abstention. Karen stormed out, papers in hand, but not before turning back and saying, "You'll regret this. All of you. You don't know who I know." I leaned back in my chair, watching her disappear into the night. The room quieted, and for the first time in a long while the air felt clean, but something about the way she said it stuck with me. "You don't know who I know." That wasn't the last we'd hear of Karen. Not by a long shot. I should have known. Karen wouldn't take her defeat lying down. For a week, it was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that clings to the skin, heavy with tension. The Jeep sat behind my locked gate, this time with motion-triggered cameras and a secondary GPS tracker. I rigged myself paranoia, maybe. But I've learned over the years paranoia's just experience sharpened by hindsight. Then one morning, around 6:30, I got a knock at the door. 2 county code enforcement officers. They had citation slips in hand and expressions like they'd been up since 4. "Mr. Callahan," the taller one asked. "That's me," I said, stepping onto the porch. "We received an anonymous report regarding multiple violations on your property, unpermitted structure, unauthorized vehicle storage, even livestock health concerns." I raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" They were, deadpan, professional, but their body language said they didn't believe it either. I showed them my paperwork, permits, and animal inspection logs. It was all in order. The taller officer exhaled, nodded, and said, "This looks like harassment." "Karen?" I asked flatly. "We can't say," he replied, but the look on his face told the truth. An hour later I got a call from Baker. "Picked up a digital footprint on one of the complaint servers," he said. "Proxy routed but sloppy. She used a burner email tied to her old HOA credentials. She's trying to stir the pot through bureaucracy." But Baker had more than just a trail of online complaints. He had a name. "You ever heard of Wallace Trent?" he asked. "Doesn't ring a bell." Retired city councilman from California, sits on the advisory board for a legal advocacy group, one that's filed multiple suits on behalf of HOAs against residents who challenged board authority. Karen's connected emails, phone logs, payments. So that's what she meant by "you don't know who I know." Karen wasn't just acting on pride. She was positioning herself for something bigger. A political power move, using the HOA as a launchpad. She wanted to turn our neighborhood into a model compliance community to showcase for her allies. My Jeep was just the first domino. I asked Baker what our options were. He said we expose her publicly. Fully I agreed. But I didn't want it done quietly, so we planned it like an op. That weekend, the HOA newsletter, normally filled with bake sale dates and lawn care tips, featured a special resident report, authored anonymously but with meticulous legal backup. It detailed Karen's ties to outside legal groups, her pattern of false reporting, and the digital paper trail of targeted harassment. We didn't name her outright. We didn't have to. Neighbors read it, then reread it, then knocked on each other's doors. By Sunday afternoon, Karen's name was on every lip in the neighborhood. And that's when the real twist came. Doug showed up at my property alone. No clipboard, no suit, just a ball cap and a nervous smile. "I need to talk," he said. I let him speak. And what he told me, he changed everything. I helped her, he confessed. She promised me a seat on the advisory board if she got the attention of Trent's people. Said we could franchise this HOA model, make a name for ourselves. I was stupid, greedy, I'm sorry. He handed me a thumb drive, every file, every message, "Yours if you want it." I took it. We weren't just dealing with a nosy neighbor anymore. We were sitting on the edge of something far more dangerous. I spent that night reviewing every file Doug had handed over. It wasn't just gossip or speculation. It was a blueprint, a full-scale plan to turn our peaceful community into a test, decide for a hyper-regulated HOA model. Karen had filed proposals, written talking points, even drafted press releases. The goal, to get national attention from policy think tanks and advocacy groups. She wasn't protecting property values. She was building an empire. The next morning, I called Baker. "We've got enough to bury her in litigation," I said. He responded, "Let's start with exposure." So we did. That week, local media picked up the story first, just a whisper, on a community Facebook group, then a segment on the county's evening news. The headline read, "HOA tyranny or power play. Local woman behind compliance scandal." Karen's face, blurred but unmistakable, was plastered across the screen. But the real justice didn't come until the county council stepped in. A formal investigation was launched into the HOA's practices. Doug resigned. 2 other board members followed. Karen meanwhile lawyered up, but it wasn't enough. With mounting pressure, the HOA was forced to hold an emergency election. New leadership swept in neighbors who actually cared, folks who understood the difference between community and control. Karen tried one last desperate move. She filed a civil suit against me, harassment, defamation, emotional distress. It didn't last long. Between the federal agencies who backed my operation, the sheriff's department, and my own legal team, the case was dismissed faster than a summer storm. The day the suit was thrown out, I walked out of the courthouse and saw Karen standing there on the steps. No clipboard, no pearls. Just a tired woman with nothing left to wield. "You could have ruined me," she said quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. "No, Karen, you did that all by yourself." And with that, I turned and walked away. Back at home, the Jeep sat behind my gate like it always had. The barn still creaked in the wind. The hills rolled gently in the distance, but something was different now. The neighborhood had changed. The people had changed. We had remembered something that Karen had tried so hard to erase. We weren't just residents. We were neighbors. We started having cookouts again. Kids played in the cul-de-sac. Porch lights stayed on a little longer. And when the new HOA sent out their first newsletter, it didn't have a single threat in it, just a reminder about the fall chili cook-off, and a note that said, "Thank you for standing up for what's right." As for me, I still work my cases, still sip my coffee out on the porch, still keep that second GPS tracker, just in case. But more than anything, I sleep easy now knowing that when people stand together, even the worst kind of power trip can be brought to its knees. And Karen, last I heard, she moved to a high-rise condo in a city with no HOA, somewhere with security gates, tight rules, and no neighbors who wave. Poetic justice, if you ask me. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around. I've got more wild HOA tales coming your way.